Hello and good day to you. Now I'm figuring out the electrical and pneumatic systems of the Zibo 737-800 aircraft in the X-plane 11 flight simulator. In this video, I'm going to try and start both its engines at the same time while the aircraft is parked at an airport. I'm sure such a parallel start is never done in a 737 because its engines are always started in sequence, one before the other. But I'll explain why I think a parallel start should work in theory. You'll also see that I could not parallel start the Zibo. So if by some chance you're watching Mr. Zibo, sir, I hope you can explain why. Could it be a problem with the modeling, or is it something I'm doing? We'll open up X-plane with the aircraft parked at a major US airport where United has a hub, so we'll use the aircraft version with the United paint job. We can see the terminal buildings behind us. There's the control tower. And we'll take a look around the field. So here we are in the Zibo. We know it's the Zibo because of the tablet on the left-hand side. We're going to call in ground services. And at this time, we're going to call in a ground power unit because we don't want to discharge our battery. And later, we're going to call in the Huffer, the air service unit, to give air pressure to the number 2 side, the right-hand side of the aircraft. So at this point, let's go to the overhead panel and start up the electrical system. We'll set the display up here on the left-hand side to show the battery. And we'll set the display on the right-hand side to show the ground power. That done, we check the standby power. It's set to auto. This is the battery. We'll flick the switch down to turn it on. Close the cover. Now you see the battery supplying 24 volts and sucking 5.6 amps, minus 5.6. So we want to go down there and turn on ground power, but first we'll check that it's available. And indeed, this is showing ground power here because of the switch setting. And we see it's supplying 113 volts, and there's a lot of it. So we go down to the ground power switch, the blue light's on, and we turn that on. That done, it's no longer sucking amps from the battery. Now we'll go over to the pneumatic side for the engine start. And this is the isolation valve which separates the left side and the right side. It's now open, so air is flowing freely between the two sides. If we take it to the up position, that's closed, so I'm going to close it. Now the left and right side are separated. And if I get pressure on the left side, enough air pressure on the left side to turn the number 1 engine, the big wheel, the spinner in front, then I should be able to safely ignite it and start it. Same thing goes for the number 2 engine. So the number 2 engine I'm going to power with air from the Huffer, the air service unit, and the number 1 engine I'm going to power on the left-hand side with air from the APU. So before I do that, let me turn the recirculation fans off. The 2 switches here, the one here and the one here, are for the left and right pressurization and air conditioning. They're both off. And I'm going to turn the engine bleed switches off. Next, I'm going to start the APU. That's a small turbine in the back. And to do that, I come here and turn on the left and right wing tanks, fuel pumps on the forward end. And the low fuel pressure light's gone off. Now we'll come to the APU switch here and bring it down to on, but that's not started it yet. We see the low oil pressure light. Now it should be safe to start. If I hold this down for 3 seconds, we'll be able to see the EGT, exhaust gas temperature gauge, climb up as the APU starts. So let's do 1, 2, 3, and there you go. And while that's going on, we'll come back up here and change our display to APU generator here. And we'll see it's not giving us any power yet, nothing available. We'll wait for the numbers to show here. Okay, we have 112 volts and something else from the APU generator, so we're good to go. The EGT has fallen and settled at a low point, and the blue light here is on, showing that the APU generator is available. So we'll turn off these inside switches for the APU generator, and we're all set. Now at this point, this is optional. We can take the ground power off and disconnect the ground power unit. Now if you look on the outside, there's nothing connected to the aircraft. The fact that the engines are turning here is probably because of a headwind. Now let's come to the pneumatic side. And now if we turn on the APU bleed air, we should see the pressure rise on the number 1 needle. It says number 1 at the base there. But once it exceeds 30, that should be enough air for the starter to spin up the big rotor so we can ignite the engine. The number 2 side, which is the right side, has no air pressure yet. So we'll go here and we'll call in the Huffer. Now if you look here, there's the Huffer unit and the air duct going into the belly of the airplane. Now you never start the number 2 engine in reality with the Huffer there, because the Huffer will get sucked into the engine. You always use it to start the number 1. All the same, in theory, since we now see that both needles are showing 20, 30, 40 pounds per square inch of pressure on the left side and the right side separately, we should be able to start both engines together because there's enough air going to each starter. So what we'll do now is we'll take a look at the displays here. The big turbine in front is rotating at 0%, which is not exactly accurate because there's a headwind out there and it's turning it maybe even a couple of percent. But I think this display is wrong. It should be showing a little bit because we can see here that the headwind is turning these 2 big rotors. They need to be above 20%. In the 22 to 25% range is safe in order for a good engine start. And that means that the low oil pressure light out here must be out for both engines. So we'll go to the display panel and we'll engage the starter on both sides at the same time. Here's the number 1 starter, here's the number 2 starter. I need to take it to ground here to let the air flow into the starter. There's number 1, there's number 2. Now we look on the display and see what happens. We see number 2 spinning up because it has pressure from the Huffer, and the APU should be supplying pressure to number 1, but it doesn't seem to be spinning up, and I'm not sure why. This is at 22, which means the low oil pressure light should be out and we should be able to start it. That's correct. The low oil pressure light is out. So I'm going to go up here and open the isolation valve and see if that makes a difference. It did make a difference because the pressures dropped. And now I see the number 1 engine has spun up to where it can be started safely, but the number 2 engine has spun down, so I cannot start the number 2 engine. Yep, sure enough, the engine 1 low oil pressure light is out and the engine 2 low oil pressure light is on. And here's engine number 1, it's spinning. Engine number 2 is not spinning as much. So we'll go back down here and verify indeed this is at 25%. That's engine number 1, low oil pressure light is out. So just for grins, I'm going to turn on the fuel and igniter to engine number 1. here's it spinning. It's spinning faster and faster. We have ignition. There you go. That's an engine start. Yep, we see this rising more than 50%. The N1 turbine is up at 20, and we have a good engine start. The start valve has closed automatically and the low oil pressure is out. Now we see that engine 2 has spun up because the start valve for engine 1 closed. And you can verify that here. This has gone back to auto, and this one is still showing ground. Now if we go down to 2 and give fuel and ignition to engine number 2, we see it spinning up too. But it should have started at the same time, and that's my point. Thank you for watching.